afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Caitlyn Johnson, and I am going to lead the Off-Counter and Grammarian Workshop today and introduce you and help you improve your subtle art as a grammarian. So while it's subtle, you really have to pay attention closely to everybody's spoken word, but it's also nitty-gritty in that if the feedback isn't crafted well and presented in a matter-of-fact, encouraging tone, people tend to feel criticized personally, even though it's not personal. So one has to watch one's tone as well as when giving your grammarian report. So I'm going to run this as a Q&A style workshop, where I have some items that I'm going to present to you and ask you about your questions, so you'll have ample opportunity to let me know what your concerns are, what you've run into, what you'd like to hear more about. So my agenda here is just a bit of an outline. So I'd like to start by asking you, what would you like to hear about if there's any burning questions or any issues that you all would like to address right off the bat?
Well, for my club, which has just completed a year, we have stumbled upon what is the requirement to be a grammarian. So I'm totally new at this. I want to be able to take back some information and some guidelines for whoever is the off-counter grammarian to monitor and manage our.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Well, officially there is no requirement. So anybody can do it, and I would encourage you in your club to go ahead and allow everybody to have a chance at it. One of the best ways to learn something is to teach it. And with the English as a second language members, it gives them an opportunity to remember what they learned, talk about that and bring that forward. And of course, one of the best parts about it is it's more stage time. We get to speak with each other and give in our 3-minute report. So there's nobody who shouldn't be the off-counter grammarian. Any other questions?
Well,
no?
No, I wasn't just, well, the reason I decided to do these classes because I am English is my second language. So I wanted to have a refresher, actually, of the correct English.
Excellent.
So that I can participate as a grammarian, because in my club, there are several people, actually probably half of the people are foreign people. So we need to have them ourselves to take on the responsibility to be a grammarian as well.
Right, absolutely. And of course, the English language, well, any language is so encompassing, you can't really teach all the grammatical fine points in it and never mind in an hour, right? So are there any points in English that bother you or you have questions about that I can help untangle for you?
Not at this moment.
Not at the moment?
Not
Okay.
at the moment. I don't recall how to say what are the areas that I would like, so let's go or if I have some question at the end.
Okay, and now one suggestion I would make to you, and maybe you all can take back to your club as well, is encourage people, new members, anyone who feels a little bit shaky in terms of grammar, to write down their questions and maybe address it with the more advanced members. You can always get a hold of me if you have questions as well, and I'll help with the specifics like that.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yes?
I have a question, but it's more of a serving as a grammarian in my when I'm serving, a lot of times when people are talking, I have trouble listening to catching. Because I'll say, well, I heard one and somebody else will say, well, I heard 7.
Oh,
yeah, so is there like a process, a tip, or?
Yes, there's actually a worksheet for that. So it's a chart, and if you don't mind, after the workshop, give me your email address and I will send it to you.
Okay.
So it's just a space for everybody's names, and it gives you columns for the ahs, the ums, the pregnant pauses, the filler words, and then there's a little section at the end of the row for grammar. So that way it'll help you, you can just make hash marks. So,
That sounds good.
yeah, it's a nice little sheet, and I meant to bring it and I didn't, so I apologize.
Is it in the manual
No,
somewhere?
no, I believe,
Or can we
I-
download that from?
I got it from one of the officers in one of my clubs last summer. So I think he made it up. I'm not sure, but you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna put my email address on the board for you. And when you want one, just email me and I will.
What do you call that again?
It's just the off-counter grammarian worksheet, or sheet, you know. So,
Thank you.
so yeah, here is, I know I'm not supposed to turn my back to the audience.
It's really hard to run the board without it.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm gonna write in capital letters so it's easier to understand what they are. And that's an @ sign. So it's WN as in Nancy, G as in girl, D as in dog, wolf @yahoo.com. And so there's the, put the grammarian worksheet. So when you email me, you'll know why you're emailing. Nothing like finding a phone number and you're like, oh, who the heck does this belong to? Why was I gonna call that person? Does anyone else have any questions?
I
Yes?
have one more.
Sure.
Use of so. As a lot of people in the club will say, well, so, the next thing I was gonna do, and since I did that, I decided, well, so it was okay to, and so, is there an abuse of so? Is so a good transition word?
It depends on how they do it. This is where the subtlety of the grammarian office comes into play. So be discerning. If you hear them using it as a filler word, call them on that. But you can also say, da da da, so I did such and so,
Right.
as kind of a conjunction. So, and that's okay too. So you want to be discerning. Yeah, good
Because
question.
we go back and forth on that one in our club.
So you're both right.
Yeah.
You're all right. Exactly. Any other questions? Would anybody else?
When is
Okay.
so a filler word? Because, yeah, we just had our meeting last Tuesday, and the grammarian said, and you use so unnecessarily, and to me, it's like, oh, that sounded okay. You know, like-
So what? Yeah.
Should we keep track, maybe like a score, like you said, so 7 times?
No, again,
no,
you
we can't
want to
do
be
that.
discerning. If you hear it as a filler
In
word,
the whole speech.
yeah, so, well, and what you want to do is listen for each incident with,
Wow.
I know, right? When you're being the grammarian, what you want to do is listen. You have to stay very much in the moment
Yeah.
and hear each sentence and each phrase in that moment, rather than trying to do an overview. Well, you said so 13 times. Well, maybe half of that was legitimate and the other half was filler. So to answer your question, roundabout way, if the way that I hear so as a filler is if they drag it out. So
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we have a.
then we did it, you know. So you can hear them buying for time. You can hear them gathering their thoughts. And of course, the better approach is to pause and then continue.
And that's.
I can see in their head, they're probably thinking like, oh.
Well, and in our culture, in Western culture, silence when speaking is considered undesirable, and it makes a lot of people nervous. Which is why, actually, it's paradoxical. It's a great, powerful tool when speaking, because everybody goes, oh, you got them right there. Exactly. And
I was going to say that most often the word so is to gather your thoughts. And I like to listen to, I watch Charlie Rose religiously and numerous other talk shows. And oftentimes the people, they'll ask a question and they'll say, so, da 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 da.
right.
But so many times their first word is so. So,
Right, and that's a
that's
good
not the
point too.
right.
In
It's
the
incorrect.
in the writing, it's not that it's incorrect, it's just that
But they're thinking,
it's just not optimal, that's all.
right, they're thinking.
Right, exactly, so
Rather
it's a
than
filler
waiting
word.
a second to speak, they say so.
So in your speech writing, that actually brings up a really good point. In your speech writing, pay attention to where you're putting so and how often are you using it. Because if you use any word too much, the beginning of every sentence, it begins to take over and dominate the speech. And it becomes distracting and people stop hearing you and they start to, yeah. I remember when I was in high school, we had a guest speaker for, I think it was driver's ed or something, and now he was from a different culture. I believe he was Hispanic, and his filler word was K. And we say it too, K, right? You know, okay. Instead of saying okay, we say K. So for the Spanish speakers, it's a natural thing to bring forward. And it was so distracting, I started counting, I started making hash marks. And in 20 minutes, I counted it 17 times. And it was like, ah! I wanted to stand up and say something. Of course I didn't, but it was totally distracting. So you want to listen yourself. And a good way to help get over, and you can recommend this to your club members, is for them to at least tape record, if not videotape themselves in their rehearsing. Web cameras are so cheap these days. They're even on your phone. And it's not about the quality of the video. It's watching yourself. The first time I did that, I was floored. I had no idea that tongue clicks were one of my things. Yeah, and so as well. I'm also really bad at that. So, does anyone have any other questions?
Where's the tongue click? Oh.
Or a slight sucking of the front teeth. Now I notice that people who have braces or orthodontia tend to do it because with the brackets against your lips, it kind of hurts. So you would end up, you readjusting your mouth, but in a way that's a little bit noisy. And people who don't have that tend not to. Now it's a tendency. It's not a hard fast rule of thumb. But I compared notes with other people who had braces once upon a time. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one.
Yeah.
My club is very multicultural. Okay, so we have Spanish, Filipinos, Egyptians, Koreans, Chinese. And when I'm grammarian, my tendency is, if it's an elaborated improvement that we need to do, I kind of say, can we see each other at the end of the meeting? And then I will point out instead of they all hearing it. Would that be appropriate?
Yeah, and the key to that is how much. If you can spend 5 minutes on one person, then you should invite them to see you after the club. But just like with evaluation, if possible, where possible, you want to pick maybe 3 to 5 things that the person did that stood out the most. Now within an evaluation, you're going to give 3 positives and maybe 2 negatives. But with the grammar, it's just, how do you do, there was no, other than your grammar was great. So.
And most grammarians in my club would just try to focus on the but
Right.
There's more than
Oh
two
yes, yeah.
And we don't know that. Now
Yeah.
that I'm looking at your handout and I say, oh my gosh, look at all the other things I should look into when I'm grammarian myself.
Right, yeah, and that's just it, is a grammarian is a lot more than just counting
You
odds.
really have to listen carefully.
Right, now part of my background is part of my degree is in English and poetry and in German, and I'm a professional writer. So for me, the grammarian aspect comes really easily and naturally, and it amazes me that more people don't have a better handle on it. Why everybody's not just like me, I don't know. But when I have a grammarian give only ahs and ums, to me, that's not really helpful. And one of the worst ways to be a grammarian is to just say, oh, you had some ahs and several ums and being vague. Give the numbers. You had 16 ums. It's like, oh, that's a whole lot more than some. And it really changes how you think about the way you speak if you know you've got this big number. Now, in order to help soften it, because as I said earlier, you want to be careful in your delivery, I will stop counting at about a dozen, 12 to 15. With the more advanced speakers, our ACVs, DTMs, all go up to 15 or more. But again, I want to go ahead and, I don't want to insult them either. And with the newbies, you really want to be careful. So pick, the top 2 or 3 that a brand new person was doing. Any other questions at this point?
I have a comment.
Yeah, sure.
When I'm grammarian in our town and we describe what we do, I say I look for spiller words and exceptional use of language. So if somebody is really, really fluent or fluid when they speak, I also try to make note of that, so so as not to pick on people. And I think too, when we give our report, it's better if we do it public, if it can, because it's a learning experience.
Right.
I'm listening too for filler words, and so when I hear a report and it confirms what I say or what I thought, then I know I'm learning how to be a good grammarian in our county.
Yeah, that's a good point, is to, when you hear really nice language, nice phrasing, now, there's a little bit of a toss-up, because that would also fall under the auspices of the evaluator.
Mm-hmm.
Say, wow, you use great turns of phrase.
Mm-hmm.
But as grammarian, absolutely, you bet, you bet. Now, one interesting element of modern English is that there are a lot of mistakes creeping into common usage. Part of that is because of our dictionary system. I don't know if you all know this, but modern American English dictionaries do not document correct usage. They document current usage, which is a total pain in the behind when you need a reference, right? So I recommend, my favorite dictionary, well, American is actually Webster's 9th Collegiate. It was published in 1988. You can still find them in used bookstores. So 9th, 10th, something like that. Yeah, one of the things I love about it, and this is jumping ahead just a little bit, is that it gives the etiology of the words. When did they come into the language? Where are they from? To me, that's a whole lot more interesting than what it means. If possible, get a hold of a copy of the Oxford English Dictionary. If you have a physical copy, it's about that thick, weighs about 500 pounds, comes with an oaken podium that it sits on. But you can also find supplements in the library, that kind of thing. So some of the common acceptable mistakes now that I hear all the time is nouns and verbs not in agreement. So for example, I actually heard somebody say in a speech contest that the people in a stadium sat together with their family. So that raises the question, oh what, all 20,000 of you are in one family? I don't think so. So there is plural, families is plural. And so that's actually that's a possessive, not in alignment with the noun that follows. But with nouns and verbs, we hear there's a pair of shoes, there's bananas on the table. There's, and it's not theirs because that is there is. It's there are. And I've stopped letting it be a pet peeve of mine because that doesn't help me sleep at night. It just kind of drives me bananas. So theirs and here's. And if we speak correctly in our speeches, then other people hear it and will pick up on it as well. So not only as grammarians, but as speakers. And my sense of it is that we as Toastmasters, our professional speakers, we should be out in the world being a good example. If we're speaking sloppily, then other people are, they're not going to notice Toastmasters as any kind, or hold Toastmasters in any kind of a higher esteem as an authority of good language and good speaking. Another thing that is common now is, or I should say, a lack of adverbs. People will say, don't speak sloppy, don't be sloppy. But I said sloppily, that's the right way to say it. So you want to add the ly when you're using it as an adverb, when you're using any word as a, so you want to pay attention to the difference between the noun, the verb form, and the adverb form that is descriptive. Don't talk slow, talk slowly. Don't be good, speak well, right? Another aspect that I hear all the time, and it drives me bananas, this one still bugs me, is people using fewer rather than less, and less rather, they don't even use fewer anymore, it's kind of falling out of usage. So the difference is this: if you can count it, you can say fewer. If you can't count it, you can say less. So there are fewer cars and less traffic. You can count the number of cars. There may be 20 billion of them, but you can count them. Raindrops, there are fewer raindrops, but there's less rain. But similarly, cups of water, you'd say fewer. I have fewer cups of water now than I did this morning, and it's not, but you would say less water. You can't count water. How many waters do you have? It doesn't work. We don't say that in English. Right? Anyone have any questions on this, on common use mistakes that are acceptable? They're not really acceptable. No? All right. Now, to get into the area of non-native English speakers, as has been mentioned, people, just as a reminder, people join Toastmasters to be corrected. I have seen in groups, in clubs, a reluctance sometimes to correct the non-English speakers because people feel like it's rude. And that's really not the case, because in a Toastmasters club, we're here to be corrected regardless of whether English is our first language or not. So it's okay to do that. And again, it's how you do it, isn't it? As with everything in the world, it's how do you do it? Do you do it kindly, or are you a complete jerk? Or pick one. Now, the criticism that I've seen for non-English speakers, non-native speakers, is enunciate. Well, the problem with that's a terrible piece of advice, because you can't enunciate if you don't know what it's supposed to sound like. Although, so instead of telling people to enunciate, tell them slow down. And also you can encourage them to maybe consult with an accent coach. This is LA, there's 10,000 of them. I'm telling you, there are Americans who need an accent coach. You go down in the deep south, wow. Another thing that's interesting about non-native English speakers is that their mistakes, a lot of it's not a mistake per se, it's just not quite right. These are often informed by one's native language. Anyone who speaks more than one language knows that a language is the world view for that people, for that culture. And of course, worldviews are not the same across the board. So I wanted to just mention briefly some of the common areas that are regionally found. In India and Pakistan, and that sub-Asian continent, there are, I don't know why, maybe they're taught this and they're just taught wrong. They say gesture instead of gesture. So I've pointed out to them that the root word is not guess. You know, you're not making any kind of a guess. In Europe, often you'll hear a W pronounced as a V, which is common. We will have good grammar in this class. But interestingly, the really excellent English speakers who are perhaps Northern European or Eastern Bloc will do the opposite. But this is the advanced ones. They will take a perfectly good V and turn it into a W. I knew a guy from Austria who would say vegetables. No, it's like he couldn't bring himself to use the V, because he had so ingrained it that in English you always say, don't say that, you have to say W. Another area that I hear in the Indic areas that's been counted as a Xerox. Is everyone familiar with a Xerox?
I'm not.
Okay. A Xerox is when a person says their phrase or word twice, usually. I went to the store, would be a Xerox. Now, in some of these areas, the sub-Asian continent areas, that's actually a grammatical mechanic. They do it on purpose, for emphasis. So instead of saying, you have a very cute dog, they'd say you have a cute dog. So that's not a Xerox. It's just part of their grammatical structure. So you can point it out to them. And now in English, it's perfectly acceptable. Nobody that I know would really even notice that, but I have seen it counted as a Xerox when it just isn't. So the key is to help them to adjust their language a little bit to that it's just a little bit more closer to our norms, rather than telling them they're wrong. So let's see what else have I got.
Caitlyn, can you go back into this
Sure.
definition of a Xerox? I didn't get it. So, because she wears a short skirts, that's not a Xerox.
Right, because they're doubling.
Just to emphasize that it's very short.
That's right, exactly. So it's an emphasis. They're using the same word twice on purpose instead of saying very. It's just short skirts. She's wearing short skirts. My example from that comes from the movie Bend It Like Beckham. I don't know if you've all seen that. Wonderful movie about women, young women becoming professional women soccer players. And the viewpoint character is Pakistani. And her mother's always criticizing her for playing soccer and saying, you look what happened to your cousin. Now she's running around half naked wearing short skirts. So does that make more sense? Is that clearer? Okay.
I got a really quick question.
Yes, of course.
Now, you call it not a Xerox. Is that in Toastmasters, if somebody says that, would you mark it as a Xerox, or is it just because it's adult, you say the same word?
Now, I would not count it as a Xerox because I understand why they're doing it.
Okay.
What I would do, though, is address it in the grammarian aspect of my evaluation of them.
Okay, because I say stuff like I'm really hungry.
Yeah, that's not a Xerox either. And now, in terms of quality of writing, it's not as good as it could be. Because you could say, I'm super hungry. You can get into the superlatives instead of saying really. So is it wrong? No. Is it a style choice? Yeah. Which one is more powerful? Because when we evaluate speeches and speaking, we're looking for what's effective and what's powerful. Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think oftentimes the Xerox is when someone starts to say something and then they'll repeat it and then they'll say, and then
They trip themselves up and
they'll
they try
try
to correct.
repeat it. That's, I think, what the Xerox
Yeah,
is.
exactly. Now, that's actually a really good point, is some words we do double up, and it's not a Xerox. I've heard that. That type of person is really creepy. It's not a Xerox, not at all. And the past, I forget exactly what, past participle, whatever, he had the measles twice. So those aren't Xeroxes either. Those are mechanical devices in grammar. Yeah.
Well, you and it's a Xerox.
And? Yes.
You just say it.
Did I?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect, exactly. Yeah, and you'll see it most commonly, as I did, when a person is trying to gather their thoughts and come up with the best. Well, for me, I'm trying to figure out the most eloquent way to say that. And sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's all just muddled, right? Any other questions?
So for the newbies, like they are just making their speeches for the first time, we don't necessarily have to mention the Xerox.
I would, if it's a true Xerox, like what I just did, yes, mention it. But again, you want to be paying attention to
the usage, the context.
And the person, is this really a really timid speaker? A timid speaker is not going to take a lot of feedback real well. They're going to feel criticized. So if the person is bold and brassy and full of pep, and you can see that, maybe they're a little bit more seasoned, maybe a little thicker skin. Yeah, so you want to just be discerning and tailor your criticism, well, not criticism, your critique to their personality. As much as you can, within reason, without whitewashing. You don't want to say, oh, it was fabulous. If somebody's up there and they're really timid, you don't want to tell them it was fabulous when it wasn't. You still want to give them useful feedback, but you want to make sure you don't overwhelm them. Yeah. Another area, I'm calling this a grab bag of mistakes, idioms, using the wrong prepositions and using mixed metaphors. Idioms and prepositions, I have found, now I've studied 5 different languages, and I've gotten pretty fluent in 2 of them. Welsh and German, and I've studied a smattering of Spanish, and I can hack my way through some French. Don't tell the French Parliament. So in my experience, mastering the correct prepositions and idioms is the hardest aspect of learning another language. It's even harder than conjugating verbs, for the most part. Like in Welsh, I'm not kidding, they conjugate their prepositions. Are you kidding me with this? Yeah, I know. Okay, they did that just to mess with the Romans. You know they did that. So when you hear idiomatic phrases used incorrectly, like it's raining cats and dogs, you know, they could say, oh, it's raining cats and frogs. Okay, fine. So you want to try and discern if the speaker is doing it intentionally to be poetic or funny, or if they just made a mistake. One of my favorite idioms, it's a Welsh one, is it's raining old ladies and sticks.
Oh.
I have no idea what that
Wow.
but I love that. The sky is falling with rain. So you want to, you can listen for those. Yeah, or mixed metaphors. You know, Matt is a hen wetter, right? Matt is a wet hen. Instead of Matt is a hatter and Matt is a wet hen, so Matt, you know. So you want to, if the person is speaking really, really well, and that's one of maybe a few things that they're saying, yeah, absolutely pick on it. But if they have a whole bunch of things that you're addressing, that's really, you know, let that one go. Yeah. Any questions?
Well, I would not be able to make comment on the idioms if I don't know the idioms itself.
Sure.
Like coming from another country and immigrating here, I'm still in, for example, in the learning stage.
Sure.
So I'd just skip that and just, you know, and what I would do is probably look it up.
Exactly.
I would like to know what this
Yeah,
means.
that's actually a good point. If you, there's at least 2 of you in here who are non-native English speakers. If you hear something that you are unsure about, jot it down and ask about it later.
Our language has so many strange idioms. I mean, you talk about somebody kicking the bucket.
Yeah, right. What does it mean?
I mean, what does that have to do with dying?
Selling the farm.
I mean, it's crazy.
It's true.
And I think a really good speaker, if they're speaking and they know that the audience has a lot of people that are not native speakers, and they're a native English speaker, should not be using a lot of those idioms.
That's
not good speaking.
No, it isn't. It's lazy. It's easy. I do it all the time because I'm lazy, and it's fun. It's a great way to interject humor into your speech. But of course, it depends on the audience and the venue and all this. So, like in a situation like this, we're going to be a little more formal. At least I'll try to be. But amongst the club, you may be less formal, and that's okay too. What are we looking at next here? Okay, we already talked a bit about counting as being more than just ahs and ums. I've got this sheet that I will send out to you if you email me if you would like it. Non-language, well, you definitely want to include non-language fillers like tongue clicks and smacks of the mouth and the teeth. That's one area of counting that I often see is neglected. And my sense of it is that people don't address it simply because they don't really know about it. It's not on their radar. So, and there could be more than just that. So you want, especially with advanced speakers get very creative with their filler words and their nonsense noises, all this. So you want to pay attention to them and try and call them out on it, because they've gotten past your basic ahs, ums, pregnant pauses, all that, and now they're trying to be higher, or they are on a higher level. So they're going to bypass that and substitute in something else. So we got here, oh, creative fillers. These drive me bananas. I have a friend, I am not kidding you. I can talk to her for an hour, and 20 minutes of her speech is filler phrases. We went to, the store and we got syrup and that kind of thing. And every other phrase that falls out of her mouth is that kind of thing. And I want to just grab her by the shoulder and say, Laura, join Toastmasters, I'm going to kill you.
How about mine?
Yeah, like is another one, but it's not quite as creative as that kind of thing. That kind of, like is only one word. My sense of it is that if she's, for her at least, she's, instead of saying like and drawing it out or so, she's using multiple syllables to do it. That's cheating. So that's what I've got for you today. As we touched on earlier, the Oxford English Dictionary is a good one to use. The, I didn't put it on here. Oh. Well, Webster's 10th Collegiate is a dynamite dictionary. If you can't find any of those, a really good indication of a dictionary to use if you're trying to thumb through it and figure out which one to buy, get the one that has the etiology, that tells you when the words came into the language and where they came from. That will have a better overall quality. Any other questions? Oh, just P.S. For actual grammatical use, like you were asking about fine-tuning your grammar and really perfecting it, there's a guide called the Strunk and White Elements of Style. It's the last bullet point on the handout. That is an excellent reference for grammar. Any other questions? No? Well, thank you all for joining me for the Grammarian Workshop.
Thank you.
I hope this has been helpful.